Now, here's what we know. I was arrested at 6 a.m. I was wearing a Roger Stone Did Nothing Wrong t-shirt. And you can order yours right now at fightback.store. Get it now before the Smithsonian snaps them all up. And I was fingerprinted and mugshotted. And when I looked at the charges, it was kind of surprising because for 3 years, Mueller's dirty cops leaked to the media that Roger Stone would be indicted for treason, espionage, conspiracy against the United States, wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering of millions of rubles into American dollars, unauthorized access to a computer, receipt and dissemination of stolen material, aiding and abetting a felony before the fact, accessory to a felony after the fact, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. I mean, they had 18 crimes that the Mueller investigators told multiple federal judges they had evidence of, and they had evidence of none of them. They could find no evidence of any of those crimes. There was no Russian collusion, but you sure as hell wouldn't know it by watching the Democratic National Convention. You wouldn't know it by watching the Democrats on television, Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff, Eric Swallowswell, Congressman Jerry Nadlier. It's as if they were asleep for the last year. Russia, Russia, Russia. No, there was no evidence that there was meaningful interference in our 2016 election. It's just that Hillary Clinton and her supporters cannot admit that they thought they had it in the bag and they got beat. So it couldn't be the brilliant, the audacious, the daring, the seat of the pants, the spontaneous, the exciting presidential campaign run by Donald Trump himself. No, it had to be the Russians. Please, give me a break. And now, I stand before you, having escaped death by this much. You see, it is the policy of the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Prisons that all prisoners who were either incarcerated for nonviolent crimes or those convicted of nonviolent crimes and scheduled to surrender to a penal facility imminently would be moved to home confinement to protect them from COVID-19. So Michael Avenatti, remember him? The guy who stole $25 million from his clients, the Democrat super lawyer, he was moved to home confinement. Michael Cohen, who was charged with a bunch of financial crimes that had nothing to do with Donald Trump, but became a witness against his own client, he was moved to home confinement. Paul Manafort was moved to home confinement. He's had a couple heart attacks, by the way. Rick Gates, who testified falsely in my trial against me, he was moved to home confinement. And then 10 days before I was to surrender to a federal facility, the Justice Department informed my lawyers that those regulations don't apply to Roger Stone. They apply to every other person in every other circuit in the United States. That every time this question is going before the court in every jurisdiction, including DC, has ordered the convicted person to home confinement. But this will not be the case for Roger Stone. At 67 years old, and with a history of respiratory problems, including asthma, the government then tried to say that there were no cases of COVID in the Georgia facility where they wanted to send me. They neglected to mention that there were 83 pending tests for which we did not have results. As of today, there's over 250 cases of COVID in that facility and 53 cases among the prison workers. So I challenged the ruling of my trial judge before the DC Court of Appeals. I thought surely the legal precedent, the current regulations of DOJ and the Bureau of Prisons, my age and health, I'm 67, they had extensive health records filed under seal, including a number of studies that show that those with asthma are particularly vulnerable to this virus. And despite the fact that by the time my case was heard, you had 85 plus confirmed cases of COVID, the judge ruled against me. Then I appealed that to the circuit court, thinking surely the law, the precedents, the facts, what was going on in the prison, all of that would matter. Folks, 20 minutes before the president commuted my sentence, the DC Circuit Court of Appeals ruled against me 3-0. Folks, the law doesn't matter. This is judicial tyranny. You saw it with Gloria Navarro. You see it today with Judge Emmett Sullivan and the continued harassment of that great American patriot, Mike Flynn. Judge Sullivan has appointed a special counsel to opine on the question of General Flynn's guilt. Judge Sullivan says that he'll decide whether Flynn should now be charged with additional charges or replacement charges of perjury because he agreed under enormous pressure to prosecute his son to plead guilty to crimes that he did not commit. Judge Sullivan has no legal authority to do either one of these things. The Supreme Court decision he points to, and he says justifies his position, actually says the exact opposite. I can't figure out if he's ever read it. Mike Flynn is a genuine war hero. He is an American patriot. Yesterday, a special counsel, who was, as a prosecutor, notoriously corrupt, said that it would be justice for the judge to find General Flynn guilty and sentence him to prison. Yet we know, indisputably, that he committed no crime. We know that the FBI agents who questioned him said he didn't lie. We know that the FBI was prepared to close this case and that Andrew McCabe kept it open, Peter Strzok kept it open.
Sorry guys, I got water.
For political reasons. And we know from their notes that he was a political target. They knew he hadn't broken any laws. It's time to end the legal harassment of Mike Flynn and let him get on with his life and back to his family, and I hope back to serving his country. So I really want to thank Michelle Fiore for putting this together. Like me, Michelle is Italian-American. We are God's chosen people. Stone, that was just a name plucked off the shelf by some clerk at Ellis Island. We had a great Italian dinner last night, and I gotta be honest with you. I told Michelle I think she should run for governor. The best I could get from her, she agreed to think about it, but I considered that progress. It's great to be back here. It is a horrific experience to take on the entire federal government. I see why 99% of those who choose to fight are convicted. They have unlimited resources. In my case, the judge essentially disallowed every powerful line of defense. So even though Clapper, Comey, Brennan, Mueller, Orr, Rosenstein, Hillary, this list goes on, Mueller himself, all lied to Congress under oath about material things, about consequential things. They lied to cover up their underlying crimes. None of them have ever been prosecuted for lying to Congress. Rosenstein lied to Congress a month ago. He said he didn't approve the investigation into Roger Stone, except for having documented which he did on October 26, 2017. Why hasn't he been charged? But I was not allowed to argue that at trial. The underlying premise of my indictment is that the Russians hacked the DNC who gave the information to WikiLeaks. I was prepared to put expert witnesses and forensic evidence before the court to prove that that didn't happen, but I was denied that ability. And last, and I think worse, I was not allowed to raise the question of misconduct by the Special Counsel's Office, the Department of Justice, the FBI, or any member of Congress in my prosecution. That's unconstitutional under Kyle's view. If such a rule were in place in General Flynn's case, we still wouldn't know the truth about what had happened to him. Look how long and hard it was to get the truth out about the Bundy case. The tsunami, the avalanche of disinformation leaking out of the government, being reported by the fake news media. So you've experienced it here locally. I lived through it. It's a horrific experience. I had to make a very difficult decision several weeks ago because the deadline for appealing my conviction was upon me. And if I appealed, my appeal would go to the DC Circuit Court of Appeals. This is the court that essentially, de facto, upheld my gag order, in which for 16 months I couldn't defend myself in any forum whatsoever. I believe unconstitutional. This is the same court that ordered me sent to my death in a COVID-infested prison, despite their own rules and regulations and precedents. This is the same court that argued that vacated their order to dismiss the charges against General Flynn. So we now have this circus where his case is being heard before 11 judges. This is the same court that said, no, Hillary Clinton doesn't have to testify about her illegal email service. What would be my chances of winning in this politicized court? And then, if I did win, and I was given a new trial, based on the fact that the jury forewoman in my case was posting attacks on me by name and the president throughout 2019, had those social media postings on a private setting during jury selection in the trial, and then deleted them after the trial. But the judge ruled that that was not evidence of bias. So I would be back for a new trial in front of the same judge. I'm going to use the same analogy twice. Amy Bergman Jackson makes Gloria Navarro look like Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm. This woman has no regard for the Constitution or the law. And in fact, when we learned that my trial had been corrupted by this errant juror, who I believe lied to the court and hid the truth about her political positioning, she said in one tweet she was a member of the resistance. But she was the same as the rest of the jury. This could have been the Clinton-Obama Alumni Reunion Association. There were no Republicans on my jury. There were no independents on my jury. There were no military veterans on my jury. There were no Roman Catholics on my jury. There were no union members on my jury. There was nobody on the jury with less than a college education. It may have been ethnically diverse, but it was politically homogeneous. Every juror had one thing in common. They all hated Donald Trump. No, I don't believe any Republican or any conservative can get a fair trial in the District of Columbia. And therefore, I had to face the reality that going out to raise another $1 million for an appeal, that even if I won, I would be back before the same judge. It was just not a gamble or a risk that I would take for my family. Very difficult decision, because by nature, I'm a fighter, and I wanted to fight to clear my name. But Roger Stone did nothing wrong, and the American people Statements Act, that's what I was charged with, your statement has to be both material, relevant, consequential, significant, and you have to have the intent to lie. So what really happened here is Mueller's dirty cops got their search warrants. They feverishly went through all of my emails, text messages, and phone calls, looking for the evidence of the Russian collusion or the WikiLeaks collaboration. Could find none of it. Sent my testimony, got my testimony from the House Intelligence Committee, given to them by Adam Schiff, in violation of the House rule and the law. Then my email was shared with Schiff. Schiff then fashioned a series of gotcha questions, all of which were innocuous in their purpose. Then he illegally took my classified testimony and sent it back to Mueller to fashion a very contrived indictment. Who's breaking the law? Who should be brought to justice? I mean, the Democrats talking about the rule of law after what they did at Bundy Ranch, after what they've done in this case, where Barack Obama and Joe Biden engaged in the largest abuse of power in American history, in which the full authority of the United States government and the incredible capacity for surveillance by our intelligence agencies were used for strictly political purposes, to spy on the Republican candidate for president, to defraud the FISA courts with fabricated documents in an effort to launch not one, but two different coup attempts against the president. And these people talk to us about the rule of law? What about when Bill was on the tarmac fixing Hillary Clinton's email case? Tell us about the rule of law. Or when Eric Holder refused to testify or turn over any documents to Congress about Fast and Furious. Tell us again about the rule of law. No, these people are hypocrites. And now we're going to have an epic clash. Let's be very clear. This is not a struggle between Republicans and Democrats. This is a struggle between the insiders who've controlled this country for the last 30 years, and to their surprise, lost control in 2016, and the outsiders. That's folks like you and I. People for whom there is no special brand of justice. This is a struggle between good and evil. This is a struggle between dark and light. This is a struggle between the godly and the godless. And the only thing standing in the way of this nation hurtling over the cliff to atheistic, godless globalism, if not socialism, is Donald J. Trump. People will tell you this is going to be a landslide. Boy, that really scares me, because it's not. There's no evidence that it is. And our own supporters say to us, well, the polls were wrong 4 years ago, so surely they're wrong now. Here's the difference. Most of the polls in 2016 were based on a turnout model that was erroneous. You see, most of the pollsters assumed that the makeup of the electorate in 2016 would resemble the makeup of the electorate in 2012. The same number of black voters, white voters, rural voters, urban voters, Protestants, Catholics, Asians, Presbyterians, Jews, in every sense. And they were wrong. The urban areas did not turn out at the same level. Rural areas performed as they never had before. White blue-collar voters came out in record numbers, substantially more than had come out. And I don't have to tell you this, Donald Trump had an appeal to certain voters that Mitt Romney and John McCain never had. These polls you're looking at today, by and large, have been corrected for that flaw. So they are based on a more realistic turnout model. That said, I have yet to see any poll where the president is so far behind that he cannot make up the ground. In fact, anybody who's been in this business will tell you that those votes that he had prior to the crash of our economy, because they were for him once, can be gotten back again. The momentum is with us, folks. The president's gaining, even as we speak, as the far left overplays their hand in Kenosha and in Portland and across America. Do you think the voters really don't understand that BLM and Antifa are the shock troops of the National Democratic Party? That they are working hand in glove together? This is one movement to create instability, to set the stage for the theft of the American presidency. But we are not going to let that happen. At the end of the year, last year, I pretty much hit rock bottom. I was angry because I knew I could not get a fair trial. I was frustrated because I was being smeared virtually every day by CNN or MSNBC, the New York Times, or the Washington Post. By the way, I don't get my news from CNN for the same reason I don't eat out of the toilet. I was deeply concerned about who would support my wife. She's not with us today because she is suffering from rheumatoid arthritis, something that developed immediately after my commutation, something the doctors believe is brought on by stress. And the most effective medications for this disease lower your immunity, and therefore taking them right now is risky. So she asked me to give you her greetings. She wishes very much that she could be here. And I ask you to pray for her because she's going through a very difficult time. But I was angry, I was frustrated, I was worried about her. And I had the occasion through Reverend Randy Coggins, a young evangelical, who told me that Franklin Graham would be in Boca Raton, just north of where I live, and asked me if I wanted to meet him. And as a boy, I had seen, I guess I was 12 years old, I had seen Billy Graham preach at a tent revival in Bridgeport, Connecticut. It was one of the most memorable experiences of my life. He was an amazing orator, one of the greatest men of the 20th century. So I jumped at the chance to meet with his son, Franklin Graham, because I knew he was a close friend of the president. And I knew the inevitable outcome of my trial. And I knew that I would be in a position of praying for clemency from our president. And I laid out my concerns to Reverend Graham, and I asked him, perhaps he could put a good word in for me, with my friend of 40 years, the president. And he said, well, I'll see what I can do. Let me give you a much better piece of advice. And it wasn't the first time I've heard it. He said, I can personally guarantee you that if you will reaffirm your commitment to Jesus Christ, if you will wipe away your sins and pledge to walk in His way. And what the Lord really wants is best efforts, sincerest efforts. He knows you're not perfect. He knows you will fall again. But you have to get back on the path. And if you will do that, I guarantee you that God will protect you. I guarantee you that God will deliver you from your persecutors. Now, others have given me this advice. My own parish priest have been very helpful to me. Father Michael Brady. I heard it from Darrell Scott, Mark Burns, and several of the African American pastors who are close friends of the president. I had begun reading the Psalms and some of the Proverbs, but folks, it just wasn't there. And then I went to this revival, and we came to the part in Franklin Graham's oration where he said, I don't care if your problem is alcoholism or drug abuse or family problems or health problems or financial problems or relationship problems. God will help you. God will protect you. God will support you if you will stand up and pledge your allegiance, invite him into your life, clear the sin in your life, and pledge to walk in his way. And in that moment, with 400 other Christians, I stood up and took that pledge. And I wasn't embarrassed. And immediately it felt like a cement block had been removed from my chest. So I'm living proof that prayer works. I'm living proof that God will protect his people. I want to believe the Lord gave the president the guidance to do the right thing as he gives the president guidance every day. Now I know that there are liberal elitists at the New York Times and CNN who will scoff at that. Oh, come on, Roger Stone, it's a head fake, it's a ploy, it's an appeal for public sympathy, it's fake. You know what? I don't care. Here's why. He knows what's in my heart. And that's what matters. I know all of you prayed for the Bundys and their plight. I did too. And I'm glad to see justice has finally been done. It is the work of the Lord. And now, we have to pray for the right outcome of this election, an honest outcome, an honest vote count. Because this is not just Republicans versus Democrats. The old Democrat Party of Harry Truman and John F. Kennedy, the party that founded the state of Israel, the party that stood up to communism in Russia, that party no longer exists. This is now the party of AOC and the socialists. Joe Biden's too conservative for them. On the days when you can remember who he is. So, take nothing for granted. Assume nothing. Whether you have friends and relatives, whether you have acquaintances here in the state or outside the state, make sure that every single person votes. Make sure that no one believes that this is a cakewalk or a stroll to victory. This is going to be extraordinarily hard fought. But the president is on the move. And I can see our polls improving in Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Nevada. And the more people see of Joe Biden, the more they're going to improve. Hell, I think we need 10 debates. So, we stand on the cusp of the greatest challenge to our constitutional liberties in our history. Those we seek to defeat in a democratic election would have this be the last election in our lifetimes. I've had my free speech rights taken away from me. I've had my rights to travel freely taken away from me, based solely on a political prosecution. My wife came from Cuba, where she and her family lost everything because of the scourge of Fidel Castro. She's seen this movie, and she says it's eerily similar. So I ask you, stand up with me for freedom, stand up with me for the greatest president in our lifetime, pray every day for his safety and the safety of his family, and pray for victory because we do battle for the Lord. Thank you, and God bless you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Roger.